and welcome to Opinionated. This is our second series and this is our third episode. Tonight the topic is encryption. Encryption all over the computer land, and it's very important for everyone, that's what we think. But more important for us than to the government, because we lost our privacy and the government never had their privacy. So encryption. For the start, we're going to have in this part, the first part of this episode, a guest from the United Kingdom, and the guest is Professor Ross Anderson. And he is a professor of security engineering at the University of Cambridge. So we're going to talk to him first, but before that, an introduction of Professor Ross's over a video clip. And this video clip is dealing with a very important issue, which is FBI versus Apple. Let's see.
What are the ins and outs of unlocking this iPhone? Surely it's just one phone. There's devil's advocate for you.
Well, the FBI started off in this case saying they wanted to unlock just one phone. That was a phone that belonged to the government anyway and was used by a dead terrorist, and as he was dead, he had no privacy rights. But once we started to dig into it, it turned out that there had been dozens to hundreds of similar cases where the FBI wanted Apple and others to create tools to get at stuff and they weren't willing. And clearly this was the photogenic case that the FBI thought they could use to batter down the door. Now, it's an enormous expansion of government surveillance powers, because traditionally in America, if the police got a warrant, that gave them the right to look. But it didn't give them the right to compel the suspect's neighbours or other people to help them. And in particular, if you take the rights to order a company to provide a weakened version of its software, there is a big problem about who else will want that weakened version of the software, that golden key, and what they're going to do with it.
What is this golden key? How would that work? If you've locked something, you've locked it, haven't you?
Well, on an iPhone or an Android phone or any other electronic device, the lock that a user can deploy to encrypt his data or her data using a password is largely implemented in software on the device. And the software can be updated, and it typically is once a month or so, to have patches against whatever security vulnerabilities have been discovered. So if you can somehow subvert or coerce the update process, you can turn the update into a golden key. And this, for law enforcement, must be very thrilling, but for everybody else it's disastrous. Because if people start worrying that software update might give the government or a foreign government access to their stuff, they'll turn it off. And the consequences of that for internet security could be really, really serious.
So I'm thinking of a real-world, non-digital example of this. Is this like you've gone and bought a safe with very strong metal walls, and then the company who sold you the safe can turn those walls into jelly?
Well, yeah, if the company has got a secret 12-digit engineering access code for use by its own technicians only, you know, when they attend a customer who is, say, for a bank whose branch manager has died and didn't write down the combination, and the safe manufacturer's technician can then enter this 12-digit magic code and unlock the bank vault, well, that's very convenient if you're a safe manufacturer. But then if the FBI says, we want you to give us this safe magic code because there's one of these safes in the Chinese embassy, and you do so, right? And then that 12-digit code gets out because, you know, Mr. Snowden puts it in his latest batch of revelations, and then the Chinese and the mafia all have this magic 12-digit code, then you're absolutely hosed. And there's an example of that from Juniper routers. Juniper make routers, you know, the telephone switches for the internet. And some years ago, it seems the NSA got a backdoor in one of these routers, presumably because they got one of their people to get a job at Juniper, or they subverted somebody who was already there. And we learned from the Snowden documents that this backdoor existed. And what happened then was that the Russians and Chinese and others went looking for it and found it. And now, Juniper routers, half of whose outputs are sold in the USA, are being used by bad guys overseas to attack America far more than they are used by the American intelligence agencies to attack targets in China. And this is blowback. This is what happens when you start abusing infrastructure and other trustworthy facilities for your own intelligence purposes, it can come back and bite you. And that's one of the reasons why far more senior American intelligence officials, Head and Roberts and so on, are now against encryption backdoors.
And here we are with Professor Ross Anderson from Cambridge University. Ross, what do you think? What happened since last year? Apple became more obliged for giving the golden key to any security agencies, or the position is the same, the golden key is gold and not anyone can have the key in the hands?
Well, the situation, I think, is largely the same, but a number of other law enforcement agencies have been joining in, pressing Apple to create a golden key. The problem is that if Apple gives a golden key to the FBI, then the British government will want one, and the Australian government, and the German, and the Italian, and the Egyptian, and where do you stop? And so Apple, quite sensibly, is saying, no, we're not going to change the design of our products in order to make law enforcement access easier, because that would weaken the products, it would undermine consumer confidence, and it would place an enormous regulatory and compliance burden on Apple itself in dealing with all the warrants that would follow.
So how important is security? And can security simply just tricked with backdoors?
Well, security is a tool rather than anything else, and it's used to support things people actually care about, such as privacy, safety, and consumer protection. And the problem is that if you undermine security by giving potentially large numbers of police forces a golden master key, then all sorts of bad things can follow. At the moment, for example, the West German Interior Minister is pushing for a golden key to access cars, right? And yes, while some people might say, okay, I will let the FBI wiretap my phone if they want, would you be that comfortable about having law enforcement and intelligence agencies being able to interfere remotely with your car, perhaps bring it to a stop, perhaps crash it and kill you, even if that's not what they intended to do? We're getting into very dangerous territory here.
So what is our way to avoid the danger? How can we secure ourselves? Now, first step, secure ourselves against the government intervention in our life. What we can do? Okay, keep with the German example. What can we do if they really got the golden key for the cars and they can influence the BMWs and the Volkswagens and all sorts of other things? How can we make any protection?
Well, if the German government decides that it's going to have a golden backdoor key to all German cars, then the obvious thing to do is go and buy a Japanese car instead. So,
I like that solution.
So you've got some power in the marketplace, or alternatively, you could buy an old mechanical car, but that won't last forever because eventually it will wear out. You know, ultimately, what we have to have is a better within governments, because at present the policy on things around information security tends to be made by intelligence agencies, because they're the people who've got the cryptanalysts and the computer security experts.
And they got the most benefit. And they have the most benefit out of it.
They get concentrated benefit. And, you know, one of the ways in which democracies tend to fail is that interests who have got a concentrated benefit can coordinate better and lobby better and shout louder. And that's why in many countries you end up getting agricultural subsidies, right? Because farmers are a more concentrated lobby. And so you get spook control of computer security for the same reason you end up, paying $3 billion a year in Britain to Britain's farmers. But as we end up getting software in everything, other arms of government also have an interest here. The safety regulators, for example, who regulate the safety of cars, medical devices, railway signals, and dozens of other things, they clearly need a seat at the table because they will be held responsible if bad things happen. Similarly, the privacy authorities, the people who are responsible for consumer protection, they need a seat at the table too. And at present, in countries like Britain, and I believe Australia, this isn't happening. The policies around encryption are being made by the security and intelligence agencies.
I think Australia, Britain, the Five Eyes are strongly connected together, and they doing whatever they like, even not telling us or not telling the British, because they use the Australians or the Canadians to spy on the British and so on and so forth. So that's a big game. And everything, all information, what they spy and record, every conversations, including us now as we talk, that goes into somewhere in the United States, underground. What's happening with this lots of information, what is collected 24/7?
Well, what Edward Snowden gave us a reasonably good picture of how this was working 4 years ago.
Yes.
But you could think of the NSA systems as being a Google, but whereas Google shows you the public stuff, the websites that are public facing, the NSA's X-Keyscore and other systems show you the private stuff. They can basically search everybody's phone calls and emails and texts. Which is a nice tool to have if you can get one, but of course it raises issues for other countries. In Britain, we've got a particular problem because the governance of our security and intelligence agencies was shown by Snowden to be completely lacking. When GCHQ was collecting the video chats from millions of Yahoo customers and found that a significant proportion of them were intimate video chats, but just kept going. And, there's no conceivable law enforcement justification for that. And so now we've ended up with a completely new oversight regime in Britain. And the problem facing the oversight regime, or one of the problems, is that these systems are designed and built in America. So all of a sudden, a new intelligence facility will be rolled out to the Five Eyes, to Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Canada.
Yes.
And we may not have a very much say in deciding what it's going to do or how it's going to be implemented. And if it's not consistent with our local law, then our local lawyers just have to tie themselves in knots to pretend that it's okay.
That's a very good explanation what's really happening. But take a further step. What's happening in our living rooms at homes when we got smart televisions and we got the inbuilt cameras and we got the audio inbuilt, the microphones inbuilt, and we're watching television and someone is recording all our conversations and they are analyzing it and they got the data. How can we, obviously don't use smart television or get off the internet, but how can we live real life without always checking what we do if we want to be protected? What is the idea? So how can the Americans tell the Japanese to make television sets which are spying on their own people?
Well, this is actually a big deal. And there was a report back in 2014 by Obama's Presidential Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. The problem that they identified was that as we see the spread of voice interfaces and gesture interfaces, this means that more and more devices come with microphones and cameras built in. And the speech recognition and the gesture recognition are typically done in the cloud. That's in Google servers or Apple servers or the toy company servers. Why? Because if you make a Barbie doll and you program it to recognize your kid's speech in the doll itself, then the battery will only last for a day. Whereas if you do the speech processing in the cloud, the battery will last for maybe a couple of months. So as a result, we're ending up getting microphones and cameras in every inhabited space on the planet. And many of these microphones and cameras are deployed in toys that are built by companies who don't really understand computer security at all. And so all this stuff can be hacked into or abused in different ways. Let me give you an example. The Mirai botnet has caused an awful lot of trouble over the last year, and that spreads by infecting CCTV cameras.
Yes.
Now, you wouldn't think that when somebody bought a CCTV camera for $40 and stuck it on a pole in their yard, that was a security threat. It's a convenient thing to do to have a camera that you don't have to run wires to. And it just uses your house Wi-Fi. But that camera can be sending denial of service traffic, which is trying to knock over Twitter in the USA, for example. And given that the company that produced these had no idea about security, it made them trivial to hack because they all had the same engineering password in them, and the software couldn't be updated.
That's right? All good fun.
this is what the future looks like. And governments are going to have to wake up a bit, and they're going to have to tell companies like Xiaomi that, look, if you ship insecure stuff that can't be patched, then we're going to turn the containers around at the dock in Sydney and send them back to Shanghai.
Yes. Ross, it was really, really nice talking to you. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. We passed more than 12 minutes now, but it's a good discussion. And thank you for accepting us and being our guest.
Thanks for having me on the program.
Thanks, Ross.
Thanks, Ross.
Stay tuned, because after the break, we're coming back. But don't forget, it's opinionated, and it's a good show, we hope. Thank you for our sponsor.